Welcome to episode 16 of Pera's Playbook. Today, our guest is Bob Wilkie. Bob played 18 games in the NHL for the Red Wings and the Flyers. He also played 302 AHL games, and he is currently a mental health advocate and motivational speaker. Bob, thanks for joining me. How are you?
Good to be here, Alex. Yeah, things are good. It's always a pleasure to have these conversations.
Yeah. I thank you for taking some time out of your night and coming on. We got a lot of different things we can talk about. But one thing I kind of thought of, looking at your career and kind of what you do now as a motivational speaker, talking about everything, is how your career is kind of an example of how being a professional athlete doesn't necessarily mean your life is perfect. A
Yeah.
lot of fans look at professional athletes and they just think that everything is awesome and they're living the dream. And I think your career is kind of an example how that's not always the case.
It's interesting because it's very similar to a job. You get paid for your job. There's expectations in your job. I think the harder part about, playing in that arena is you've got 20,000 people every game watching you and judging you. And then you've got the media and social media, talking about how well you're doing your job. And I think it's an interesting perspective because, like you said, most people think they got it easy. They make so much money and they do all this. What they don't understand is it creates a whole different set of challenges to try and deal with as an individual.
Right. And you had some other things, in your career that caused you struggle on top of just the regular everyday struggles of a professional athlete. But might as well start, talking about, when did you start playing hockey? I mean, did you start right away as a little kid?
Yeah, I was real little. Where I grew up here in Calgary, we had we lived in an apartment complex, and right out front of the apartment complex, they would put up a hockey rink in the winter. And so, 2, 3 years old, just like all the other little kids, your dad gets you the little two-bladed skates, and you start with that. And the next year you get your own blades, and it was just something I loved to do. It was so much fun to do with my friends, and I was fortunate. I fell in love with the game of hockey early, and it made doing all that work and spending all those hours very easy because that's what I wanted to do more than anything.
At what point did you start to realize that you could make a career out of it, or that you wanted to pursue it, as a kind of a lifetime thing?
Oh, watching Hockey Night in Canada. They didn't have all the teams that they have today. So typical Hockey Night in Canada was Montreal and Toronto, or Montreal and Boston, more of the original six teams than anything. And yeah, I just remember those times with myself and my dad and my little brother every Saturday night, and wanting to be Guy Lafleur, Lanny McDonald, all these different players. And it was just, I fell in love with it, and I saw that there was an opportunity, to do that on TV in front of all those people, and it resonated with me and started me on a path that, yeah, it was exciting.
Who was your favorite player growing up?
Like I said, I think Guy Lafleur was kind of my idol. He was, he had the hair, and he could skate fast, and he could shoot and score. And I just remember watching him do all that, and that was just so appealing to me as a young athlete, to be able to do the things that he could do. He was the guy that I really admired at an early age.
Yeah. So your first kind of major hurdle or major struggle, road bump, happened when you were playing juniors. You guys
Mhm.
had that horrible bus accident that kind of, based on everything I read and, different things I watched when I was doing my research, affected you then for the rest of your playing career. It was something that you could really never move past. So, how did that, obviously, like I kind of mentioned, threw a wrench, just unexpected tragedy, in your career.
It happens so much in life to people. The thing called trauma, and at that point, we didn't know, there wasn't a label for it. There wasn't a lot of research or understanding, even fully what it was at that time in the 80s. Hard to believe. So, I've had teammates that had injuries where they couldn't play anymore. There was a young guy, Brad Horning, broke his neck, getting hit from behind into the boards. And you see these things in the game, and you just never think that they'll happen to you. And I think that's, one of the things that I've really learned about that time in Swift Current and going through that accident is nobody planned for that. It was just another bus trip. It was just another day. We were excited. It was after the Christmas break. We were a little bit leery of the weather because, everybody's been on the road when it's not exactly the best to be out on the road, but it wasn't a second thought. The bus driver was driving nice and slow, and no need for concern at all. And it's just one of those things that life does, is it throws things at you. And it was a horrific day. Knowing what I know about trauma and what happened to my brain, it caused me to go sideways. It caused me to constantly relive a lot of the those moments, lots of flashbacks, lots of nightmares. All the while growing up in an industry where you couldn't talk about, if you were struggling or not feeling right, because, that's a sign of weakness. And it was my draft year. So, there was a lot of stress and pressure. So it was almost that perfect storm to show what can happen to, human beings when they're not prepared. They don't have the proper support. They don't know how to communicate properly. They're not in an environment where those kind of conversations are allowed. And that really spiraled me downwards. And, it was 10 years of living hell.
Yeah. And we really hadn't seen, kind of the mental health coming to the forefront of athletics just till the last couple of years. I mean, it's really only been a handful of years since it's really kind of taken, and there's been some different athletes that have really pushed it forward. But it really hasn't taken off since recently, which is crazy to think. You're talking about something that happened back in the 80s. And here we are in 2023 talking about how it's only been a few years that we've really had an understanding of how it affects athletes and how it's okay for athletes to speak out and to be heard.
Yeah, it's in its infancy stages for sure. It's fantastic that it's finally happening. I think that there's a lot of education that needs to happen to learn how to do it the correct way. We see a lot of issues where athletes are not knowing how to do it. We see a lot of issues with coaches that don't know how to respond to it. We see a lot of issues with parents that don't know how to support their athletes. So, there's so much education that needs to happen to do it the right way. But, we're talking about it, and people are more willing to have the conversation than ever before. So it's a really encouraging time, because you think about, the US Open in golf has been around for 150 years, and the Super Bowl is on number 60 some, and the Stanley Cup, and, all of these professional sports and how long they've been around. And to think that it's only taken 150 years for us to figure out that it's a difficult thing that can cause some major issues.
Yeah, definitely. It is kind of crazy when you sit back and think about how long it took us to figure it out, especially with all the tools that have been at our disposal, and how smart we're supposed to be. So after that accident, you mentioned that was your draft year. Going into the draft, that time had to have been much harder for you than obviously most other kids. They're just focused on hockey and hockey only, when you've got this other stuff kind of haunting you. How did you, at the time, try to navigate that to fulfill your dream of getting to the NHL?
Well, after the accident, I really, I lost a lot of drive. When you see something like that, it puts life into a different perspective. And, to be away from my friends, to be away from my family, to be dealing with a coach who was extremely negative and controlling. It was not a healthy environment to be in. We were all damaged. We were all hurting. And, when people get into those states of being, a lot of bad things can happen. And we, as a group, kind of used the drugs and the alcohol to be able to numb the things that we were feeling, because we didn't know how to express them. And so when I got to the draft, I didn't care. I didn't really want to be there. I didn't really know if I wanted a future in the game after going through that. So when I look back, at my life, there's a lot of things that I wish I had the opportunity to go back and do a little bit differently. And that's definitely one of them. Is that day, my dad was so excited. The draft was in Detroit. He got to meet, Gordie Howe and all of his idols. And he was like a little kid in a candy store. And all I could do was think of, I don't want to be here. I just want this to be over with. And that's a really shitty regret that I have, was that I wasn't able to put myself into a place, ask for help in those situations, so that I really could have enjoyed the experience of the recognition of the hard work and being drafted. It's a real honor. And unfortunately, I just didn't feel that.
So one of the things, obviously, everybody dreams of once they make it to the NHL is scoring in the NHL. You scored a couple goals. Do you remember those goals pretty distinctly? Who you scored them on, where you were playing, what games?
Yeah, those ones for sure, they stick out. There's a handful that I can remember vividly. My first one with Detroit was my first game. It was my first shift. It was my first shot on net. We were playing the Washington Capitals. I scored on Mike Liut. And then it was really interesting because when I got called up from Philly, the team wasn't doing quite well. So whenever somebody, got called up, it was to try and shake things up a bit. So I remember Dave Tippett and a couple of the other older guys kind of teasing me, calling me Moses, that I was going to be the savior and turn around what wasn't going well. And, again, first shift, I'm sitting on the bench, ready to go, excited. And I had this little ritual where I would crack one of those little ammonia capsules and take a little bit of a sniff and then spray water on my face. And then I would go and play. So I'm sitting on the bench and I'm getting ready and I crack my little sniffer and I grab the water bottle and I squirt it on my face, but it was Gatorade. And so the guy I'm supposed to replace comes off. I'm jumping on the ice and I've got Gatorade dripping all over my face and into my eyes. First shift, first game with Philly, I skate up to the blue line. I get a pass from the forward. I make a little move and walked into the slot and scored on my first shot again. Against Darren Madeley. And it's funny because I actually have that video clip and, everybody's coming in and high-fiving and hugging me. And all you see me doing is wiping all the Gatorade off my face. So yeah, those are two goals that I remember distinctly. Yeah.
It's sticky eyes and you still scored. That's kind of neat how both of your goals were first shifts, first games with those teams. Kind of interesting how they both kind of shook out that way.
It's really interesting because when I look back, there's a little bit of a pattern there. When I got traded from Calgary to Swift in the dub, the first game we played was against Saskatoon. I had 4 points. Anytime I got traded from one team to another after that, I always went and had some very good success because I was excited and it was a new opportunity. All those things, prove people wrong, all those different things that I could use for motivation. Allowed me to make the transition quite quickly.
So, going back to the kind of the mental health struggles and everything, you obviously you mentioned that people really didn't talk about it. Did you know of other guys while you were playing that had mental health struggles, or, could you kind of tell, but they didn't talk about it either? Everyone just kind of kept it under the rug, or did you feel like you were pretty much alone?
There was definitely times where I felt alone. I think in all the years that I played at all the different levels, somebody was always going through something. You could see it in one way or another in behavior or, kind of loss of that emotional control, checking out, not engaging, so many different signs. But we didn't know any of this stuff back then, right? We just thought it was the ups and downs and, they'll get over it or they'll get through it. But definitely no education on how to verbalize what we were feeling. And really no way to try and start a conversation when you saw somebody going through something. So it was a difficult time for everybody. And I think it was and continues to be more widespread than people really realize.
Yeah, you're not the only player that I've interviewed that had struggles. I interviewed
Yeah.
Jim Thompson,
Right.
and when he got hurt and his ended his career, he wasn't that old, and he spiraled, downhill into some of the lowest spots of his life. He talked about his addiction issues and suicidal thoughts, and all these different things that ended up, and again, there was no way to get help at the time. So it seems to be a pretty common theme now that we hear about that nobody knew of back then. Now everyone's sort of there's a lot of guys who are in your shoes that are motivational speaking and trying to use kind of what they went through to make sure obviously other people don't go through it. And we can kind of loop back to that motivational speaking here in a second. But what was the factor for you to call it quits playing, to decide to retire from playing hockey?
I was 26 years old. I had just come back from Germany from a really bad experience of the team not doing well, not getting paid, getting fired, not getting my money or plane tickets home. So I was really sour on the game of hockey, and I found a job back in Cincinnati in the International Hockey League. And I went back, and again, pretty excited, good team, good coach, cool city. Cincinnati's pretty cool city. And 10 games in, I blew out my back. I was just turning from backwards to forwards, and I had already had a back surgery at 21. My back went out, and the doc told me, yeah, you probably shouldn't play. If we have to fix this again, it'll mean that we have to fuse your back. You got to think about the rest of your life. So that really started deep depression. I had been battling depression for some years before that, but that really kind of threw me over the edge. And I spent a year in probably the lowest place that I had ever been, which scared the hell out of me because, I was going to be this successful hockey player. I took a year off, lost, confused. I went back and saw a doctor a year later, and I said, Doc, is there any chance I could play? And he said, you know what? The time off has really helped it heal. It looks fine. I think you'd be more than capable of going back and playing. So I actually went back and played 3 more years. And at the age of 30, it wasn't going anywhere. I knew I wasn't going to get back to the NHL. Started to question why the hell I was doing it. The last season I had played, I got hit and a skate cut me. My cheek wide open. I think I had 40 stitches and it broke my jaw. I came back from that and I had a 3rd-degree separation, and I was meeting with the doctor, and the doctor, was quite concerned because I didn't feel any pain. The broken jaw and getting kicked in the face with a skate didn't really hurt. And, my shoulder hanging off my body didn't really hurt. And he said, you seriously need to consider a career change, because if you can't feel this pain, you're really going to hurt yourself one of these days. And so that's when I decided that as a young husband and a young father, I needed to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, as athletes, there's so many times where you have to hang up the skates or cleats or whatever sport you're playing because the injury is just not worth the rest of your life, ruining the rest of your life. There's been a couple cases recently, I can't think of off the top of my head, but I remember seeing them in the news where guys basically past few years had to quit because they didn't want to risk their lives playing this sport when they had families, like you mentioned. And you're only 30, like you got your whole life ahead of you. You got a lot of, hopefully a long life ahead of you at that point. So you don't want to screw it all up just for one more year of hockey.
It's amazing how hard that decision is. Like that it's not good for you. There's a
Yeah,
massive risk involved, but your brain just, so that ego kicks in. It's like you can't, like this is who you are. This has been your whole life's work. So, the mental battle that goes on for anybody that's going through that kind of transition where they've been one thing for so long, and now they have to start considering not being that anymore. In all the people that we work with, and anybody that transitions, it's a massive mental challenge that few know how to maneuver through well. And we see it with kids transitioning out of university, where they start to really struggle with anxiety, and depression, and start to get involved with drugs and alcohol because it's so painful, because here they are coming out of university, and they don't really want to know, they don't know what they want to do with their lives.
Right. Yeah. There's so many points throughout people's lives where you can hit something like that coming out of, like you said, college, working a job, different things in your family life, your kids moving on. There's so many different places where these obstacles can arise.
Yeah.
It's really, it can happen anytime in your life.
I think that's the coolest part about doing this work and being able to relive my life with a different perspective is I'm grateful for all the things that I got to learn and experience. And yes, they were extremely painful and hard, but they've made me who I am. And I think for any young people that might be out there, any parents that might listen, anybody that might be struggling with anything, when you use the courage to kind of go through and be uncomfortable and ask for help and learn some things, it's amazing what a new life can look like. If you do it right, it's evolution, and it will be better than the past one.
Yeah. So at what point, we talked about retiring. When did you get the idea to start sharing your story? I got mine, the motivational speaking and the mental health help and all of that. When did that start to become an idea for you?
It was never part of the plan. The first thing I did when I retired, I grew up in an entrepreneurial home, so I had started a drive-through coffee shop business in Pennsylvania, where we would make these little huts just like you see all over, and serve coffee, but they didn't have these on the East Coast. So I had these grand ideas, no different than becoming an NHL hockey player, that I was going to start this franchise of coffee shops. And so I spent a lot of time doing that, and it unfortunately didn't work out the way that I wanted to, and I ended up losing everything. So again, another transition, another one of those life's challenges. And I got involved with some friends, and we started a hockey pro shop business. So was really good, and we were coaching and teaching and running our own programs, and took one store, built it into 4 stores, and was having some good success. And I was feeling really good. I was doing a lot of work on myself. I was healing. I was finding, people who could help me put myself back together. And I went to some training with a gentleman by the name of Bob Proctor, who ran a program called Life Success. And it was all around gaining, learning about yourself, but getting a coaching certificate. And I thought, if I can use all of these shitty life's experiences to teach young people what not to do in a way that it actually works, I'm going to go and explore that. And so 2008, I had finished Bob's training. I spent a year with his organization, really learning how to put all of my stories into a context that would help people. And I went to my partners in the pro shop. I was coaching young kids at the time. And I said, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I want to go and teach these kids these skills. And it started in 2008. It's been a 15 plus year journey. I've been all over North America. I've worked with, 6 and 7 year olds all the way up to professionals. And it's been a wonderful journey, just educating people about themselves and how they can manage their lives better.
Yeah. And it helps for people to hear it from somebody who's gone through something, and it makes it easier for you too to know how to help people because you've been through it. So, I mean, obviously people want to always help, even if they've never experienced what their loved one is going through, but it's not necessarily the easiest to help when you don't know what addiction that person's struggling with, or many different things. So when somebody can hear it from you, and the fact that you were a professional athlete, that resonates with a lot of people too. So there's all these different factors that make, listening to you more helpful than, no offense to any family member or any other person that's trying to help somebody, but it makes it sometimes easier to hear it from a person who has a platform like you and has gone through the experiences.
I think that's the thing that I really wanted to focus on. I didn't want to be a motivational speaker. I was never self-proclaimed. I think people had just, said over the years that it was so inspiring or so motivational. That was definitely not my intention. My intention was to educate. and provide as much information, and then tie them to my stories so that that they were connected to me and what I was going through, and they could see themselves in that light, and then be able to share what I learned to overcome those things. That's always been and will continue to be my mandate and my purpose, is to really provide the education so that people can do it themselves.
And you do one-on-one things, right? You do larger events, but you also do just like one-on-one coaching sessions with people.
Yeah, so the programs that have been developed here at I Got Mind started with teams, and so we do a lot of teamwork. We work with teams with all different sports, male, female, it doesn't matter. We include the parents and the coaches because we really identified, over the years, one of the major issues, Alex, out there was the culture of sport is actually really unhealthy. Anytime you put competition and a bunch of people in one building, there's some bad shit that's going to happen. And when you don't know why you do things and you don't understand how that could hurt somebody, it causes a lot of issues. So that's kind of how we started. And then individuals would come and say, hey, can you help me? So then yes, we would evolve into that. And then a dad would say, hey, my business is very similar to what these kids are going through. We're all over the place. Can you help us? Or, one of the moms would say, I'm a teacher. Can you come and work with my kids? So it's just slowly expanded because the issues that we see in sport are kind of the issues with society. And, no matter if it's a schoolroom or a locker room or a boardroom, people and are going to struggle together simply because they don't know how to, connect with each other, be honest and communicate in a healthy way, not take things personally, not fly off the handle and become impatient. And that's how it started. And these are all the different groups that we work with. And, again, it's wonderful to see groups of people learning and growing together. That's the one thing that I have learned is, when you get a group of people that are committed to becoming the best that they can for themselves and for each other, it creates a culture that will only enjoy success in the end.
Do you have a lot of other people that with you at I Got Mind, whole team of people now?
Yeah, we started to identify that mental health was going to come to the forefront around 2017. So I started, searching for some mental health clinicians, psychologists, that would be able to, share what the science is learning about our brains. There's so much that we continue to learn about humans and their brains and why we do certain things. So we started with that, and then started to get other professional, former coaches. Corey Clouston coached in the NHL. He's a part of our team. We've got some former collegiate football players, female hockey players, former educators, 30-year teachers, coaches, athletic directors. So we've got a really great team here that provides a unique and diverse perspective to the teaching content that we've developed.
Yeah, that's really awesome that you've been able to assemble a group of, like you said, diverse. I mean, you're not just focused on one, like only hockey, because I played hockey and those are the only people I want to help. You've got all kinds of people from different walks of life and different experiences to try and help people. We mentioned that like the infancy stage is how mental health and athletics, mental health and everyday life, is still in its infancy stages. But in a athletic specific situation, being as this is your kind of your main focus, just wonder if you could like talk about what you think the importance of mental health, coming more forward in athletics is, how important that is for the future.
I think what we've really seen, over the last 5 years in particular, is athletes that are having success. The majority of them are having it because of the balance that they have in their lives, because of the wellness of the individual. When we watch professional athletes and they have a great year and everything's good because everything in their life was good and they were healthy and mentally healthy and balanced and just everything going. And then the next year, we see things drop off and all of a sudden everybody's criticizing that athlete and, complaining about how poor their performance is for their money. And the mental health issues that go along with that, it's on display all the time. And, we're hearing more and more of these young, successful athletes talk about the team of people that they have to support them, the sports psychologists or the life coaches, or, I think it's fantastic that the Marines are starting to get involved in helping athletes understand mental toughness and what you really have to do. So it's encouraging, it's exciting, it's fun to hear, guys like Rory McIlroy talking about his mental wellness and what he's doing and what he's learning, and it's just a very encouraging time. The unfortunate part is, Alex, is COVID has caused a lot of issues. Parents unrealistic expectations of their young athletes going to kind of be their cash cows. There is a severe problem within youth sports in entitlement, which stems from the parenting. It's created an imbalance where now we're losing good coaches because the parents have become so combative. And we see more and more kids not really understanding how to work hard because they're being given everything and they're not having to understand or work for anything. So, as much as it's good that we're talking about these things, I think the problems are bigger, brighter, and more worrisome now than they were, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I completely agree with you with the whole, youth sports aspect. And that's the spot too where it's most important because it's the beginning for all of these athletes. And when you put those tendencies in them that young, it's hard to outgrow them. It's hard to get it out and then to change it. And like you said, you're losing good coaches. People don't want to coach. People don't want to ref. People don't want to do any of this because how unhealthy it's kind of gotten to. It's really, it is an unhealthy for the kids. It's unhealthy for the parents. They don't even understand how unhealthy it is because they're the one, they're the ones. So, and you're also seeing it at other levels. I mean, like we said, it's at the infancy stage. It's great that it's here, but there's a lot of work to be done moving forward. It's nowhere near where it can be, and hopefully where it goes someday here in the future.
My coaches, when I started playing pro, I remember Barry Melrose, and he was in the locker room the one time and he's like, this game is 90% mental. And I'm like, yeah, but how the hell do you do that? Because nobody was teaching us how to do it. Nobody stressed the importance. It was mental. It was 90% mental, but you got to figure it out. It's like, well, how the hell am I supposed to figure it out? I can't even figure out the breakout. I can't even figure out how to live on my own. You know what I mean? The bloody washing machine throws me for a fit. There's all these things that we're just not taught. And it's so unfortunate because the ignorance of not knowing these things is the cause of all the issues that we see. Why did I struggle with depression? Why did I struggle with anxiety? Why did I use drugs and alcohol? Why did I, fantasize for years about my death? Because I didn't know how to not do that. And I didn't know how to communicate those things. And that's the unfortunate part of why we're seeing suicides increases and all the different issues, the drug overdoses, people are in so much pain that they don't want to do it anymore. And, these suicides and the drugs, it's showing, unfortunately, a lot of people an easy way out, whereas 20, 30 years ago we didn't talk about those things, and sometimes maybe not talking about some of the bad things in life might be a little bit better, because I think some of that has contributed to glorifying an easy way out of life when it's difficult, and that's just not the way.
Yeah, I think that's kind of an important piece you mentioned about how sometimes not talking about it, sometimes if you really over publicize something, you really put it out there, it's not always the best way to tackle fixing that situation. And in the modern world, there's so many stresses upon athletes, upon regular everyday people. I mean, you look at students in college, and depression rates and anxiety are at some of the highest they've ever been. I mean, you see studies where it'll, for different universities, 60-70% of the student body is seeing some sort of a therapist or a counselor. And that's really an astonishing number when you think about how many kids and, even adults have to utilize services to just make it through day to day. I mean, it's great that they have the services there to help them, but you also think, like, why do so many people need that?
It's a really interesting thing, Alex. I love to study human behavior and the history of human behavior, and what causes certain things, and what people are going through. We're so fast. We become extremely impatient. And the unfortunate part is, the importance of self-care, the importance of community, the importance of, loving thy neighbor. All those things have gone out the window. And so losing that social connection, and then having the technological advances that we do that make life so easy. I mean, look at you and I are, you know what I mean, worlds apart, and we're doing this, and it's so, and nobody has to leave or do nothing, right? Turn on the
Yeah.
lights and the camera, and away we go. It's made us soft, and there's not as much of the mental resilience of the generations before us. And they didn't do things right either, but they didn't know how to do them. But I tell you what, they were a tough group. The issues with depression and anxiety, when they started to understand what those things were, are not at were not at the levels that they are today. So here we are in the 21st century with all of the luxuries, all of the conveniences, all of the things that we can do as a human species, and yet we're more sick physically and mentally than we've ever been. So it's something to pay attention to. And for anybody that's listening out there, I hope it puts it into a perspective of the importance of being, educated and really learning about, what these things are, to the level that you don't have to deal with them anymore.
And I think another huge thing that, I mean, it's really taken off in the last 20 years and really changed mental health is social media. And I'm sure you see it working with different people and how that can affect kids. I mean, it's to the point where you look at elementary school students, they'll have an iPhone, they're all on social media already. And you go out to dinner and you see parents sitting on their phones at a restaurant, and the kids are, being ignored, or then you get the kids on social media that they look and they see influencers and how perfect their lives are, and they feel like their life isn't good enough. I'm sure you run into that a lot, dealing with different things. As much as social media is great, you can stay connected with your family, friends from far away. I think some of these conveniences that you mentioned, and the technology, they've definitely added to the stress. They've supposed to make our lives easier, but in many cases they just add stress and anxiety. And for some people, they can't escape that social media. It's just that it's really hard now for to not have any form of tech. I don't have a smartphone. You don't see that often. Or I don't have social media. You don't run into that very often.
No, it's it's one of the biggest problems. And it's really interesting, because we work with a lot of parents, and when you start talking with the parents, like, if I could just get them off the bloody phone. And so then I ask the question, well, who gave them the bloody phone? And then how much do you struggle with the bloody phone? Right? Because that's one of the things that I think I really see is that, parents are concerned that their kid spends too much time on there, and that, that they have to have better boundaries and do all those things. But then when you watch them from afar, how much different are they? Right? So they're saying one thing and doing another, and it's creating, these terrible, terrible addictions. No different than drugs and alcohol. You watch, some shows out there, and people are doing experiments, with leaving their phones in a fishbowl. We're going to have dinner together, and you got to leave it in the fishbowl. And man, do people squirm without their phones, right? No different than somebody who is addicted to heroin would do the same thing, right? They start to get all twitchy, and they start to get all scratchy, and it's like, screw it, I got to get my phone, I'm out. Like it's just it's such a terrible thing. And when you understand and learn about our brains and the different chemicals that our brains releases because the phone gives us that instant gratification. I need to buy something right now. I need to check on my friends right now. I need to check on how many likes I have right now. I need to, we become that now, society. And patience, is one of the greatest virtues we can have. Unfortunately, we are suffering greatly from a patience deficiency in the world today.
The whole, what you mentioned about the instant gratification, that's totally where our, society is at. People want it right away and they can get it right away. That's part of the problem. Like you said, you go right on your phone, you can order, it could be at your house tomorrow with fast shipping. And but the other thing I think that you mentioned that's important is the likes, with different things. People, get it in their head that if they don't get enough likes, they're doing something wrong. And when they hit that likes, it relaxes them. They get that shot to their brain, the chemicals, and they're filled with excitement because they got 400 likes. Which really in the grand scheme of life doesn't matter how many likes you get, how many people are looking at your stuff. A while back, I went through, I was following, I don't know, 1,000 people on Instagram. I wanted to have all these followers. I don't know if I thought it was a status symbol. You had a lot of followers, you were cool. I went through and I purged through my Instagram. I think I follow like 200 to 300 people, and I have 200 to 300 followers now. Most of them are my close friends and family and a few sports teams. And it's amazing how better I felt, after I, kind of took a step back. And obviously I'm still on social media, but I really took my presence back and cut it back. And it's really amazing. Same thing on Snapchat. There's people, I snap 40 people. I got all my Snapchat streaks. I keep in touch with a handful of people, and it really makes your life happier.
The people that in days gone by, when somebody was important to us, we would pick up the phone and have a conversation. We didn't need to look at somebody's social media. And yes, we've met a lot of people in our lives, and Facebook, I would say for the most part, was made to reconnect and do some things. It's turned into much more than that now. If there's somebody in your life that you feel is valuable and you would love to have a conversation or share something, don't put it on social media. Pick up the phone and call them. Get back to the traditional ways, because the thing that we've learned, and one of our mental health clinicians, Sean O'Grady, talks about all the time is, we're very much wired to be connected. We are social creatures. And unfortunately, social media has allowed social interactions to go on with no consequences. See, when before social media, if you said something about somebody, I could confront you. And if I didn't like that, we would get in and I'd punch you in the nose and you would never say that again. Now on social media, you can say whatever you want to whoever you want, and there's absolutely no consequences for anything. So, our communication skills, our self-importance, all of these unhealthy habits are really being developed. And, we have a lot of online courses that educate our clients that we help, whether it's athletes or adults, whatever. Building habits for success is one of the courses. And so through the process, the participants have to identify one habit that they want to change. And it's amazing with, people 20 and under, how it's the phone. Right? I'm going to change everything about me and how I use this thing and how it hooks me. So I'm going to eliminate my social media. I'm going to reduce my screen time. I'm going to put it away, at 8 o'clock at night, and I'm not going to look at it till 2 a.m. And I'm just going to reduce. And within a week, in talking with these individuals who are committed to making a better way for themselves, the change is astronomical. It's just like they've been able to take off the chains, the rose-colored glasses, and all of a sudden now they have a much healthier mind, a much healthier body. They're sleeping better. They're not worried about things as much, all because they did the right thing and stop getting into the liquor cabinet. And that's exactly what it is. It's a bad addiction that you have to become aware of and manage.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. Well, we talked a lot about a lot of important things that are really need to be in the forefront, and people can't be afraid to talk about them. It shouldn't be a bad thing to talk about mental health and all of these different things. And one thing I always hope with doing my podcast is that somebody can, that the episode might help somebody. They hear a story or a journey about an athlete, and they realize that that athlete went through the same thing and they made it through, so you can make it through. And same thing with this episode. I hope somebody listens to it and picks up some piece of advice out of the things that we talked about, some of the things you mentioned that you do it. I got mine. But I was hoping maybe we could end on, and it could be hard because obviously there's a lot of advice you could give. But if you just had to give one piece of advice, maybe something kind of consistent that you've seen helping different people, whether it's for young adults, young kids, or older adults, what would be like one kind of strong piece of advice with some of the stuff we talked about, just mental health in general, that you would give?
There's two pieces I'd like to share, Alex. One,
Sure.
the first is for anybody who might be struggling. It's so important that you understand that you're not alone. And, as someone that went through it for a long period of my life and very much isolated myself and felt alone. The minute that I started to open up to people and really, be vulnerable, and vulnerability is just, I know that somebody may judge me for this. I know that somebody may, say this is stupid, but I still need to open up. And the more that we practice the vulnerability, and really pay attention to who we're sharing it with, right? You've got some personal stuff. There's certain people in your life that you can talk to, and take that first step and really practice being vulnerable, because vulnerability takes courage. And when you combine those two things, you can solve your problems, and you can get to the place where you're living healthy and producing and feeling productive and becoming more confident. But it all starts with being courageous and vulnerable. And then for people who, may have somebody in their life that is struggling, what can you do for them? Because I know I've been on that side too. I feel hopeless. I feel helpless. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. It seems like everything I try and do or say is the wrong thing. Ask them, what can I do for you? How can I support you? Has something happened to you? Right? Don't think that you are going to be the solution to their problem. Help them come up with the solution for their own problem. That's the greatest thing you can do, is help them develop the skills to be able to not feel or do the things that have been harmful to themselves. So if I could pass on those two things, I think if anybody took them seriously and started to practice, you're going to see significant improvements rather quickly.
I agree completely. I think those are great piece of advice to pass on, and things that people don't always hear, but they might, take it to heart, and it could make a huge difference in their life or somebody else's life. Well, Bob, thank you very much for coming on this episode and talking about your career and what you've been doing, and just kind of mental health in general. It's great talking to you.
Thank you, Alex, for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. Keep up the great work. And hey, if you ever need anything in the future, don't hesitate to reach out.
Well, thank you, Bob. And everyone, go check out I Got Mine and see what Bob's got going on.